Presentation from these guys. Is it possible for you to push it to us here or no? Because the one that's on here is the old one. Oh. I might be able to do real fast. Give it about a minute. I'm gonna go upload it on Granite. Okay, I'll push it on. Okay, well, so just FYI, I got the presentation from these guys on here is a dated one that we received 2 days ago. They just pushed one to us about 2 hours ago. I would say Andrew and I looked at it quickly. I looked at it on my phone.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm asking him to push it to you guys, so you have a chance to get a better look at it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So how, do you think it'll show up here?
It'll show, but that like P1 presentation, if you click, that's not the
Okay.
one.
Cool. Mm. Yes.
I know, I usually am over there.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Switching it up.
Is it, I don't know, it's all good.
Yeah, no problem.
No, that's good. Okay, so we're going to get the meeting started. So I'd like to begin the meeting, the Parks, Open Space and Trails Commission meeting for May 29th, 2024. David, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, Chair, Chair Judge,
Here.
Vice Chair Hornbrook,
Here.
Commissioner McInerney,
Here.
Commissioner Moon,
Here.
Commissioner Burr.
Here.
Great. If any members of the community would like to touch on something that is not on the agenda today, and that's what's on the agenda is the Tiburon Parks and Recreation Master Plan and the Town of Tiburon Transportation and Infrastructure Study. So if you'd like to touch on something other than those two items, now's the time to speak. You would have 3 minutes. Do we have anyone? Anyone online?
No one online.
Okay. All right. Um, David, do we have any oral communications?
Oral communications online or in chambers, and the next topic would be commission and staff briefings.
Any, that's what I meant
Oh,
to say.
staff, yeah, not
Any staff briefings?
not for staff. Well, let me talk about our paving project. We're gonna have a pretty large paving project that's gonna happen here sometime middle of June. It's mostly dealing with the streets that were removed from our paving project last year to try to reduce the budget size that we were moving forward with. So about a dozen streets that are going to get slurried and paved. So we're going to start on that here this mid-summer. Another good news I have is for the goats that were here gracing the open space. I did speak with the owner, Capra. They have revaccinated all of their goats with a special vaccine that will help them digest the more toxic French broom that we have here in Tiburon. So they will be out here this fall, a smaller herd, half the size, and we're going to combine that again with our mechanical means to help continue reduce the invasive species and reduce the fuel loads that we have out here. So those are the updates that I have.
Great, thank you. Okay, with that, I think we can go to the first item on the agenda, which is a presentation item. It is on the right, minutes, sorry, thank you. Yes, we have to approve the minutes from March 28th. Does everyone here have them? Has everyone seen them? Yes, okay. So I will take a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I'll do a roll call. Chair Judge,
Yes,
Vice Chair Hornbrook,
Yes.
Commissioner McInerney,
Yes.
Commissioner Burr,
Yes.
and Commissioner Moon.
Yes.
Motion passes.
great. Thank you. So now we'll move to the presentation item. This is an information item. It's meant to share information out to the community. There will not be an action or a vote on it. WRT, which is the firm that the town contracted to conduct a master study of what is possible on our parks and open space and trails. And the keyword here is possibilities. These aren't decisions made. And it's a long process, but they're gonna provide an update. And they'll present information on their key findings and the priorities that have been sort of called to attention through their community engagement process. They'll touch on site considerations and park zones, and they'll give some information about costs and funding on those possibilities. What they're presenting today is based on the direction that the town council gave them in their March meeting. And they'll just discuss the process from here on out, what the proposed decision framework is. WRT, I'll toss to you, but can you make sure to also recap the process that you have taken for community engagement so far too? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Judge. Yes, so with that being said, we do have WRT here this evening that will provide the Post Commission and members of the public with an update based on feedback from Town Council at the March meeting, and also feedback throughout the whole entire process from beginning to where we're at right now. So with that being said, I will have Peter Winch and Olivia Grenzbach, yes, provide us with their presentation this evening.
How's this? Good, and hopefully people online will be able to hear as well. Thank you very much, members of Post. We are here to update the community on our progress as we continue to develop the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Really special project, it's very important to us, and I'm also very excited about the possibilities that this begins to lay out for Tiburon in the years ahead. I'm joined today I'm Peter Winch with WRT. I'm joined today by Olivia Grenzebach and also David Ross from MAC5. MAC5 is our partner, one of our partners in this process, and has contributed some of the cost analysis. So really grateful to David for being present and helping us introduce those estimates to you. All right, so we'll do a little recap of what we heard from council and from the Post Commission in March, and what that means for our schedule and our scope of work. And then we'll walk through progress on this plan since then. So we're going to start with draft guiding principles and policies. And what we've introduced before are a set of recommendations or policies. I think based on feedback from council and Post Commission, we've wanted to take a step back and frame those as guiding principles because of the need to really have a clear philosophical framework to ground this planning effort in. Then we will introduce a decision-making framework. What are the components that will go in that should inform the decision makers during the next 15 years or so as this plan is implemented? What are the things that matter? So we'll walk through that. And the three categories of that decision-making framework that we've drafted for today's presentation and which we hope to carry forward into the plan. The first is recreation amenity priorities. What are the recreation improvements that are priorities in this community that this plan should anticipate? Two, what are the site considerations that we need to pay attention to when we think about what kinds of improvements are appropriate in what locations? And so that's the where. And then third, and number 6 on this agenda, is costs and funding. And that's kind of the how. What are the estimated costs, and are there relevant funding sources that can help the town achieve these recreation improvements? So starting with the recap, we were at Town Council right here in this room on March 20th. Just as a very high level recap of what we heard from council. There was some discussion of pickleball, primarily because there was a strong contingent of pickleball supporters in the room. So we heard from council that there's a desire to accommodate pickleball in a way that doesn't create negative impacts. And they wanted to understand better what the community's tolerance might be for indoor facilities as well as outdoor facilities because of the noise concerns. They talked about a pool and recreation center. Those are two potential priorities that have emerged through this process. And for some on council, pool is definitely a priority. And there's an interest in accommodating a full range of aquatics. There also was a reminder that the plan needs to identify the facility improvement needs at the ranch, because we do have a community center, and it's important to understand to what extent it is fulfilling our recreation needs and what improvements would be needed. We heard some discussion of the parkland along Richardson Bay, which will be one of our focuses tonight. And I think high level, there's a desire on council to preserve the peaceful and natural character, especially south of the Knoll. And there were mixed opinions voiced about the potential for future buildings or structures anywhere on that parkland. And then there was discussion about what this master plan should look like. What kind of a tool is this going to be? And so the direction that we got was that plan should provide a philosophical framework for decision making. It should include a prioritized list of recreation amenity improvements based on community support. It should provide information about what amenities are available in nearby communities. It should provide information on costs and funding. And it should create a zone system for the parks to guide additions and improvements in the future. And that we should rely at least as much on that, maybe more on a sort of a zoned, on sort of a park zoning than on specific recommendations for specific improvements at sites. So less emphasis on drawings showing actual locations of improvements. And then also there was a desire for more opportunities for public engagement. So that's the basis for the extension of this schedule. Post commission, we were here a week later, and there was some additional discussion. So around Richardson Bay Parkland, I think a reaffirmation of the idea to maintain more passive use south of the Knoll, but also upgrading the existing playgrounds, and really an interest in concentrating active recreation opportunities near the near and at the sanitation district site. There was some conversation about downtown, because we've also focused on downtown as a place where recreation improvements can be made. And interest in connecting the open space trails and there was interest in a small play structure at Tether Park and the potential of doing some building conversion. The building that came up was Shark Deli into an indoor pickleball gym. There was some discussion of open spaces and trails and raising the need or the concern to protect species in the open space areas, and then also direction for the master plan, echoing council, a desire to establish criteria and prioritize recreation amenities and to provide estimated costs for each amenity. So we have, in the time since March 28th, updated our schedule, and I'm showing that schedule graphic right here. It's kind of hard to read, I think, at this distance for most of us, but everything in yellow is basically an extension of the project schedule. So we were previously anticipating wrapping this up in June or July, and now it's likely an October timeframe to give more opportunities for input by post-commission, council, as well as more community input. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more detail at the end of the presentation. So moving on to guiding principles. I want to ground this in community feedback that we got. So, and this actually, maybe this is where I'm going to address, I think there was a request to hear a recap of what we've done with the community so far. So using this schedule graphic again as a guide, the community engagement is presented at the bottom of this slide, kind of along the bottom tier. We had early in the process last summer, last June, there were pop-ups. So we had booths out at Friday Night on Main and at the Classic Car Show. And we did a community workshop. We met with community partners and in this room, just in small conversations, and we did a community workshop in this room. And then we did a walking tour, kind of a fun, like mobile workshop at Richardson Bay Lineal Park. That was sort of through the course of last summer. Then during the winter, we held a community workshop right here, and another couple of workshops online, so that we were able to focus on some specific sites and hold a series of online workshops to give people a chance to weigh in on the types of improvements that would be appropriate in different locations. And there was also a statistically valid survey that was sent. A survey was sent to all households in Tiburon. That was actually last fall, I believe. And we got a lot of response to that survey. So that survey, you'll see more about that during the course of this presentation. That's not exactly community engagement, but it is an important source for understanding community needs. So feedback on issues and vision during that process. What are the key issues the Parks and Recreation Master Plan should address? We heard about the need for better access, concern about high speeds on the old rail trail, not a lot for teens and kids to do, a desire for more community events, limited activities for older people, some frustration with the existing children's play areas, which don't have a good access to bathrooms or parking. Sometimes the rules and signage aren't clear and the identity of parks isn't clear. feedback on issues and vision. There was a vision for Tiburon having safe, vibrant park spaces where all members of the community could come together, and a comfortable, accessible system of open spaces, trails, and parks. More connected paths for jogging, biking, and so on. You know, that use of the old rail trail is so good. Could we make that bigger and better? Expanded offerings for kids and teens. Maintaining the tranquil, unique beauty of the place, but also improving certain parks by adding features. We have a lot of great parkland, not really a lot of recreation features. Can we build on that? So those were some of the things that we heard in terms of issues and vision. So based on that, and based on all of the analysis done, we have now, this is new. We're suggesting that the plan can be built around these 5 draft guiding principles. We're looking for your feedback on these. This is first draft. So 1, preserve the natural beauty and tranquility of Tiburon's parks and open spaces while enhancing the park experience. 2 is introduce park improvements and recreation amenities using a decision-making framework that accounts for community identified priorities, site characteristics, and cost and funding considerations. 3 is work with the ranch and other partners to strategically enhance recreation programming and create events that bring the community together. 4 is create safe and attractive access to Tiburon's parks and open spaces and enhance their visibility. And 5 is recognize opportunities for Tiburon's parks and open spaces to provide benefits for our environment, including recreation, as well as habitat and green infrastructure. And I think I might glide past these next slides, but these slides each speak to one of those guiding, these policies each speak to one of those guiding principles. And the only reason I would glide past them is that we've presented these before. These are the recommended policies that get into more detail about how each of those guiding principles could be achieved in the plan. The only thing I might call attention to here is the text in green is these are new policies that are introduced now based on the conversation we had at the last 2 meetings. So I think I will call attention to those recommendations. So one of those is to strategically add recreation elements based on community priorities and funding considerations. So previously we had some policies here that were more specific about specific recreation amenities. And here I think we're pulling back potentially and just calling attention to the process. And again, in this recreation amenities category, calling attention to the decision-making framework process in this plan to plan for new recreation amenities. Here again, in programs and events, calling attention to that decision-making framework. And then in the environment category, we heard, and I think we recognize this hadn't been addressed in the policies previously, about the importance of protecting sensitive natural communities. So managing our open spaces and trails in a way that makes sure that we are being protective of sensitive vegetation. So now we'll move on to a concept for a decision-making framework. And again, this was, I think, a really important request that came from council and from Post to embed within this plan a really clear decision-making framework. So this is our first attempt at that, and I hope it is meeting the expectations, and I look forward to the thoughts and discussion that will come out of this meeting. But what we are suggesting is a what, where, how framework. What being what recreation amenities should we be providing? Where is site considerations that will guide the location, and how is a matter of costs and funding. So looking at the first aspect of that, recreation amenities. So we want to very briefly summarize community feedback on recreation priorities and then survey responses. Those are the 2 kind of drivers here that give us an understanding of what the community wants. So community feedback, we heard a lot about playgrounds. We heard a lot about demand for pool and swim lessons. Definitely heard a lot about pickleball. There was pretty consistent enthusiasm about a kayak and SUP launch, and a lot of consistent enthusiasm about trails. And that residents want community spaces that allow for informal gathering and community events. There are a lot of other things, I think, there are a lot of other things we heard from the community, and we tried to work those in. And I think in the slides that follow, you'll see that we've tried to represent what we heard from the community in terms of specific recreation amenities. The survey that was done resulted in these really, I think, helpful charts that combine. I'm going to kind of focus our attention on the little box on the right. This is called priority investment rating, and it combines the stated importance of people who filled out the survey of each of these recreation amenities combined with their level of need. So if it's important, if it's an amenity that community members said, this is very important to me, and they said, my need, or our families, our household's need is not very well met for this amenity, that combination is what brings amenities into that red zone of high priority. So this chart is summarizing, based on the survey, what the community's top priorities for recreation amenities are. So these are they're often consistent with what we heard from community members during the engagement events we had, but not always. And so there's a challenge here of trying to synthesize these two sources of information. And it's a challenge that we've been working through throughout this process. So I think it's a familiar challenge. Let's go to the next slide. So what we've done is we have taken that list of that priority investment rating list that we just saw in the survey, and we've added a column on the right, which is level of support during the community engagement events. And the key here indicates that 3 dots there means that was something that community members spoke a lot about. We heard about it from community members a lot. 2 dots is kind of medium, and 1 dot is not, it wasn't a big focus of things we heard from the community. And so what this chart is it takes the priority investment rating chart from the survey, but it modifies it based on what we heard from community members. So if there was an element that was lower in the survey chart, but got a lot of attention from the community, it's bumped up in the list. But we've generally used the survey as our starting point. So I think the survey is the bigger influence on this list of priorities, but we've allowed the community engagement to push and pull individual elements higher and lower on the list. So what we come out of that with, and this is draft, and we're looking for your feedback, as the top priorities, the highest priorities from this process are playgrounds, kayak SEP launch, multi-use paved and unpaved trails, a swimming pool, outdoor pickleball courts, outdoor, I think this is repeated. There's a tennis courts line. It actually should be lower on the list because it had just 1 dot. So there's a little mistake there. Conservation areas, community center, picnic areas and shelters, and an off-leash dog park. And if we go to the next slide.
Can we ask questions as we go, or should we hold?
Yeah.
Okay. The playgrounds on the statistical survey was NA. Was that not an option in the survey?
Right. It wasn't on the survey.
Okay.
So that's unfortunate. It probably should have been on the survey.
Got it.
Yeah. Maybe we continue, look at the medium priority, medium tier 2. Park equipment for all ages and abilities, outdoor amphitheater, public art, gymnasium / indoor multi-use courts, shade structures, small neighborhood parks, sand volleyball courts, bike park, community gardens, outdoor exercise and fitness equipment, large community parks, golf course. And then tier 3, rectangular sports fields, skate parks, splash pads, environmental education center, indoor walking jogging track, outdoor basketball futsal courts, and diamond sports fields. Then we also want to give some attention to programming.
Peter, can I
Yes,
just ask a real quick question?
Yep.
So,
yes.
for example, if more people came, I'm going to use splash pads because I don't know if anybody even knows what I think I know what a splash pad is, but if a lot of people came to a lot of engagement and all those pieces on the splash pad, that item could have potentially moved to what I'm seeing to the middle tier 2, probably not tier 1.
Yeah.
Is that a fair, just kind of your weighting that you were using?
Yeah, I think if it was a very high community priority, it could have jumped from one tier to the next.
Okay.
If it was a medium priority, it would have jumped up in the list within that tier.
Got it. And if it same low, it would have stayed, or
Yeah.
medium, it would have stayed in its own zone. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
But also all these weren't listed when you had the pop-ups. You had certain things listed, not necessarily all these.
That's true. It wasn't, it's been a little bit apples to oranges in terms of the amenities that we've tested and asked about. Okay, so looking at recreation programming, this is not facilities, but actually programming that is done by the ranch or others. The highest priority, and again, this is a combination of importance and level of unmet need. The things that came out highest were adult fitness and wellness, community special events, exercise classes for all ages, senior programs, and cultural enrichment programs. And then there's a set of medium priorities and so on. These were less modified during this second process. If we continue on to the next slide, because our engagement focused less on recreational programming and I think more on spaces and places and a little bit less on programs. So I think we heard less. I think if we had focused more, we would have heard more. I think it could be something that we spend more time on. There are some things that I think with the opportunity to do a little bit more engagement, we do have the opportunity to spend a little bit more time getting information about things that we may have not gotten great information on before when we engage the community. But I guess what I will say here is we did hear a lot about community special events. That was a theme, the desire to have gathering places for places and opportunities and events for people to gather. That was something that came up again and again. Okay, let's keep moving. So 3 tiers again of recreation program priorities. And then we move on to the where question. Site considerations. What do we take into account when we think about improving parks? So we started with access. Access is an important way to understand how to organize things spatially. And so in all of this work, we focused really, we just looked at Richardson Bay Lineal Park because it's the site with the most complicated geography and the most opportunities for change. There are other sites in Tiburon that have good opportunities as well, but this is our focus. So here we
Just real quick,
Yeah.
Peter, that's your focus for this presentation, but will you use this rubric for other locations?
I think we'll use the rubric, but we won't necessarily do the mapping. Like we'll have the criteria so that the decision-making criteria will be available for decision makers, but I'm not sure that we have the bandwidth to do detailed mapping of all the sites.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So this is an access map. We've drawn buffers around the parking areas, and you can see, just to orient us, the left side of this map is actually kind of northwest. So the orientation is a little bit skewed. But those are the parking areas at Blackie's Pasture. And we've also drawn lighter toned access buffers around each of the sites, each of the locations where pedestrians or bikes can access Richardson Bay Lineal Park. So those represent the highest access portions of the park. Let's keep going. The next consideration is topography. And so here, obviously flat areas are maybe more amenable to having more recreation amenities on them, whereas steep slopes, much less so. So this is an important thing to understand. Obviously, what really shows up here is the knoll, that hill. And we also see the narrow slope along the edge of the old rail trail, because that was a railroad berm. And you see you also see the incised drainage that goes through Blackie's pasture, that creek corridor. The third map is showing sensitivity to noise. And this is an interesting one. What we've done here is we've mapped a 100, 200, and 400 foot buffer. This is how we started, 100, 200, and 400 foot buffers from neighboring houses. We understand basically the sound of pickleball, which is the most important concern, I think, for a potential program element in this park. But also there could be other things like gatherings, like performances or amplified noise that would be something that you want to think about where you place those noise sources. Basically, everything within 400 feet of these houses, we're showing as having a moderate noise sensitivity, that noisy uses within that 400-foot buffer would need to have some sound attenuation to make that work better for houses. I think for adjoining residential uses. I think we want to recognize also that the slope below Tiburon Boulevard and below the old rail trail provides some sound attenuation itself. So that slope is important. And it also is worth pointing out that Tiburon Boulevard itself is a source of noise and is an intermediate source of noise between the houses and anything that would take place in the park. The fourth, I guess, map here has to do with flood hazards. And here we're showing in dark blue the 1% annual flood hazard zone, and in light blue the 0.5%, or is it 2%? Is it 2% and 1%? Now yeah. So basically you're seeing susceptibility to flooding, which is right along the shoreline, but also in Blackie's pasture. And then thinking about sea level rise and the long term for tidal inundation and storm surge to have more of an impact on Blackie's pasture. And you can see that in the light blue, which represents the long-term potential 60-inch sea level rise scenario.
Peter, can we?
Yeah.
On this sea level rise one, kind of take one look at this. I don't know that I've ever seen a map on the sea level rise here, but I'm a little surprised that there's not more risk in that area. I mean, this is good to see, but just would like you could comment a little bit more about where this information came from and how it's made.
Yeah, good question. This is from the Bay Wave model. I don't remember the year, but it's pretty recent, and it's the one that is used by Marin County.
I think it says 2017, but
2017. I think it might be recent.
Well,
Actually.
your footnote says 2017.
Yeah, I think we might need to correct
You may want to check, because I think there was an updated one and that basically went into the different parks or different homes on the backside there. That was updated that I remember seeing in the Marin IJ. I'm happy to search for it on their website right now and send it to your team.
We'll check our data for sure. I think that we're using the current GIS layer, and it does actually show that this blue, you see this blue going across Tiburon Boulevard and into residential area. So that is consistent with what you're describing, but it may be that we need to correct this. The next consideration has to do with sensitive vegetation and wetlands. And what we're showing here is the marine wetland, the tidal marsh restoration project. You can see outlined. This is the restoration project on Greenwood Beach. It's a little bit hard to see at this scale, but it's an important consideration of a sensitive area. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, the large body of color here is an estuarine marine wetland. And so this is mostly actually submerged, but has times when it becomes partially partially above water level. And that, of course, is also part of the Audubon Sanctuary, that part of Richardson Bay. Then in green, you see forest fragments, which are not necessarily sensitive, but are, I think, worth understanding and probably trying to work around, because those are pieces of intact, more complex forest woodland. And then we have some plant communities right at the mouth of the creek that are sensitive tidal marsh habitats. So we have tried to use all of those maps, and it's as you can imagine, this is not super simple. These all map onto each other in sort of complex ways, and they have implications for change or for management of park space that are nuanced. We've tried to distill that into a set of 6 management zones, and this is draft. So this is for our discussion. There's nothing final about this, but we're going to walk through each of these management zones with you here, and then I think there's going to be hopefully a lot of dialogue. So the first 3 zones we're calling A1, A2, and A3, and these are our more active use zones. And you can see that A1 is being mapped primarily at Blackie's pasture, but not right along the creek corridor, with some setbacks from that creek corridor. A2 is mapped primarily where McKegney Green and the sanitation district site is, mostly flat, but less accessible. And then A3 is really along the old rail trail corridor and the slopes that are along that corridor. I'm going to introduce the other zones after we walk through these in a little bit more detail. So A1, we're calling that flexible and accessible. It is characterized by a high degree of access, relatively flat topography. It can be variable in terms of noise sensitivity. It would have low vegetation and habitat sensitivity. It might have variability in terms of its susceptibility to flooding and sea level rise. Typical location of this zone would be the pasture. And typical uses in this zone would be a destination playground, a flexible event lawn, or a multi-use field, outdoor spaces that support flexible use like Tai Chi or yoga, an amphitheater, a picnic area and pavilions, demonstration gardens, restrooms, multi-use paths, soft surface trails, and parking. And the things that sort of knit these uses together are that they're things that have broad community interest, and they have that benefit from a high degree of access. But they're also in a location that doesn't lend itself well to structures. I think trying to maintain in this environment greater flexibility so that use patterns can benefit the community at the broadest sense. A2, we're calling active and recreational. This zone is characterized by having medium access, also relatively flat, like A1, variable noise sensitivity, low habitat sensitivity, and maybe some long-term or low-risk flooding and sea level rise vulnerability. And here is where we're seeing the opportunity for more focused active recreation activities. So while these potentially could also be in some cases good in A1, I think what distinguishes them is they're more targeted, they have more specific use groups, and they may be use groups who are willing to walk a little bit further and don't have to have access right next to them. So this is sports fields, sports courts, playground, but not necessarily a big destination playground because it's a little far from the parking lot. Teen hang, picnic areas and pavilions, restrooms, and multi-use paths. And then our A3 zone, we're calling special recreational. And this is again on the old rail trail and the slopes that support it. Variable access conditions, variable topography, including steep slopes, variable noise sensitivity, low vegetation habitat sensitivity. And here we're looking at, of course, the multi-use path, that's key, but also things that can make use of the slope. So like slides, pump track potentially, bike park, amphitheater, seating. Okay, now we're going to shift to the two passive zones and the one ecological zone. So we've identified these as P1, P2, and E. And you can see that maybe I'm going to kind of start in reverse order. E is mapped on the most sensitive locations. So it's right there where along the creek corridor and at the tidal marsh, along the Greenwood Beach restoration area, and in the fragments of forest where you might want to just let those be. P2, I'm sorry, P1, no, P2 is areas that you probably want to maintain mostly in a natural condition, but it could have trails in them and so on, but you have generally it's gonna feel like open, like naturalized open space. And then P1 is where it's generally passive recreation activities that are appropriate. Like you could have small playgrounds, picnic areas, picnic shelters, and paths, but not like sports fields and that kind of thing. So P1, that one that I've just mentioned, we're calling that low intensity recreation. So picnic areas, playgrounds, teen hang, open lawn, art installations, multi-use paths, soft surface trails. And we're seeing that in south of the Knoll. P2, more like nature and trails. And here we're looking at undeveloped open space, soft surface trails, nature trails, and then E, the ecological zone, where you really would not have any recreational use at all. It would be preserved for natural features and vegetation, habitat restoration, and shoreline adaptation. So this map now is showing those all together on one map, how this would map onto the Richardson Bay Lineal Park.
If you look at the sanitation pond site, I know in some prior maps you have it kind of outlined, and here it's not. Is A3 and A2 overlap that footprint?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think A3, I don't remember exactly the boundaries of the sanitation pond site, if it goes right up to the rail trail or if it's all on the flats. But basically the A3 should map onto the sloped portion of that site. And otherwise it should be in A2.
Okay, so A3 is just the steep kind of hill that's coming down, and then A2 is the flat part.
Correct.
Got it.
Should we keep going or do we want to have more discussion on this now?
I think keep going.
Okay. I'm going to hand it over to David Ross to talk a little bit about, actually, David, I have I think some lead in that I can help you with. Yeah. So first of all, we want to emphasize in the plan that this idea of total cost of ownership, which is that once you build a facility, you have to maintain it over time. It requires things wear out with use. They need to be replaced every through what's called a life cycle process. And then they need to be maintained, and then the whole system needs to be operated. So there are costs throughout that process, and the plan needs to come with that perspective. We're going to walk through capital improvement costs, which is sort of the beginning of that tiered system of costs. And I will hand it over to David, and then it'll come back to me to talk about operational costs.
So what you're seeing is really an in progress, rolling up your sleeves analysis of the potential scale and potential costs of each of the recreation amenity elements that have been carried through this process and developed into the high priority, medium priority, and low priority elements. And one of the tasks here that we've been given is to, instead of developing cost models for specific development plans. We've been asked to take an approach that we're developing more flexible, kind of kit of part menu style opportunities and identifying likely costs for these elements that are not necessarily site specific and not necessarily scale specific. So one of the things that Peter and I will be working on is fine tuning the scale elements so that we can actually develop a range of costs for each of these elements, from a small version to a large version. So our first pass was really looking at what we thought might be the larger versions. And then the cost analysis is scalable. So we'll be developing, is it based on a linear foot, square foot, acre, how is the unit for each of these elements defined, so that when we go to scale it, we can take a 20,000 square foot item, and if we want to look at what a 10,000 square foot item looks like, we're literally just cutting that number in half. That gives us the flexibility and the tool to come up with quick cost analysis for site-specific opportunities down the road as you guys use this as part of your framework. So the range will be from what we consider to be a small version for the town of Tiburon and a large version for the town of Tiburon. And that may be different than a small version for the city of San Francisco and a big version for the city of San Francisco. We're trying to actually develop the range that is appropriate to the town and what we've heard throughout this process in terms of likely scale of these opportunities. That said, this is our first pass at that, and there might be some feedback on some of the scale of these elements, and that's welcome. That's one of the reasons that we wanted to get this out, so that people can look at it and, identify if we're on the mark for what at this point we would characterize as the larger size in the range. And then we'll be trying to focus on what a smaller end of that range is, so we can provide the costs as a range of costs. One of the things that we struggle with when we are asked to do this is some of these elements tend to be site specific, whether you want to recognize it or not. And one of the items that we struggled with right off the bat was the kayak SUP launch, because the scope of a thing like that varies dramatically depending on where it is. And what the need is. Is it shallow water? Is it a beach access? Is it deep water access? Each of those has very different requirements in terms of the scope of how you would address it. So we're having conversations about how to make this as useful to you as possible. And for instance, that kayak opportunity at the Belvedere Cove seemed like one of the better opportunities. So in fact, we are going to end up modeling it after that, because it has very unique cost associated with it, having to navigate the grade difference from the sidewalk down to the beach, the potential for a seawall development in that area that would actually make any kind of ramping and pedestrian access actually more difficult to get over the top of a seawall, or whether we would have a passage through the seawall that's a gate, that's a sealed gate, as it will be used by some of the residences down there, that you can't walk over the seawall there to get to their waterfront properties. You need to go through a gate that can seal up and become part of the seawall. So we'll look at options like that, and some of them are better fit for this kind of kit of parts menu style than others. When you look at things like a community center or some of these other elements, they truly are just kind of less site specific and scalable, and can be applicable to a number of sites without great consequence. Obviously, very sensitive where you put these things, but in terms of costs, it's not a tremendous impact. So we've walked through each of the elements that were presented earlier and developed initial cost models. And part of that in developing the cost models is a brief description of the scope of what it is, how big it is. And I don't think we've got time to walk you through the entire list. But maybe I can just walk through a few of the items in the high priority list to give you a flavor. We did look at the multi-use paved trails and multi-use unpaved trails, and we developed a model that's based on a per mile cost of developing those. One of the questions we have is, should we be including a typical trailhead element as part of that? Is that something that the town would like to formalize at any of these locations and have that in the kit of parts to maybe have a restroom or at least a trailhead with signage and maybe benches and you know, typical kind of trailhead elements. And if we want to include that, we would just break that out as an option that could be plugged in at any locations that you might consider that element to be. And maybe a plug-in number for a restroom, a simple park style restroom. Just so you have that if it makes sense in any particular locations. Swimming pool is a fairly complicated animal. There are a lot of variations on swimming pools. There is the recreation pool model. There's the competitive swim pool model. There are hybrid pools that can accommodate both elements, like the Mill Valley Indoor Facility does, with a play element and a lap swim element. A lot of facilities end up doing two pools, a small recreation style pool and then a separate lap swim pool, because typically those are two different temperatures. So we also included a lot of the bits and pieces of pools. You've got to have a pool house, you have to have a pool deck. So we broke out swimming pool into some detail so that you could assemble some of those elements, and each of them again are scalable. So what we sized it initially, I think on the lap pool for a 25-yard by 25-meter, which is a common smaller community pool size, but it could be smaller, it could be larger. Moving down with looking at some outdoor tennis and pickleball courts. The fortunate thing is the cost model for tennis and pickleball is very similar in terms of square feet. You get about 2 tennis courts for every 6 pickleball courts. So if you basically scale the model at a 2-court setup for tennis, it would translate to 6 pickleball courts at a very comparable cost. And that would also include any hybrid multi-use setups that would potentially accommodate both. So from a cost standpoint, those are fairly interchangeable. And we've developed models for picnic areas on a square foot basis, so you can simply scale any of the picnic areas and then broke out a picnic shelter as a separate item that could be added to any of the picnic areas that you're looking at. So we took this and then the community center, I initially sized it at about a 20,000 square foot community center, which is a moderate community center. By no means is that a large community center, but I don't anticipate Tiburon having the space and the need for a large community center that we would see in other communities. And Mill Valley would be not even a large community center, just in terms of the scale of these things statewide. Mill Valley would be on the larger side of a moderate community center. And absent, if you take the pool away from Mill Valley, this is somewhat comparable to the Mill Valley Community Center. This is we continued down into medium priority, identifying elements such as an outdoor amphitheater, the gymnasium, multi-use courts. Now that one's really has an enormous range. So we priced this initially as a full gymnasium, and typically that would be a collegiate long court in the gym, in the main gymnasium, then can be subdivided into 2 high school cross courts. That's a model that many communities use for a gymnasium, but I know that word has been used interchangeably with a lot of other program elements on the recreation side in this study and in conversations with the public, anywhere from fitness equipment to multi-use courts, potentially even in the Shark Deli. So this is the absolute, I would say, upper end of that scale. And it could be scaled down to, a much smaller facility. Should you want to be looking at things like the Shark Deli site and that kind of site, for a smaller recreation, facility. And
May I ask a question about that Shark Deli site? I saw it a couple of places here, including pickleball. Doesn't ANC or somebody else own that property, or is that town? Okay.
I haven't done much research on that. I'm kind of hearing it, but I haven't been a party to a lot of the talk about it. I don't know, Peter, if you have any insight into that.
Yeah, it's not town owned, but some type of partnership.
Yeah. I know at one point, even the CVS was talked about as a possibility for this kind of adaptive reuse. Should it be making sense in terms of a deal for the town? That's actually a little larger facility that would handle a little greater program. But similarly, it would be an adaptive reuse of an existing building. Does save you some money, but it's not optimal. And I'm not sure what really would fit in that Shark Deli. I'd be surprised if you could get a single court in there.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think with that, I'd like to just ask if there's any questions, and I know you probably are seeing this for the first time, but I would recommend you do dive into it and look a little bit. We are encouraging feedback at this point on any of these elements. And we're hoping we struck the right type of scale and the right type of program elements for each of these, but it's difficult when you just use a word like gymnasium.
Right.
That can mean so many things.
So specifically, you didn't put anything for sand volleyball courts?
We haven't priced that one yet. And again, yeah, this is in
There's a-
progress.
There's a great study done by a resident of the town of Tiburon.
Oh.
On the cost of that. I'm sure Peter has that.
Okay.
Or you can look in the archives, it's tiburon.org, and you can look up on the meeting notes. Or I can do it for you for a small fee. That's me being sarcastic. And also I noticed that there wasn't anything for the other ones, like the outdoor basketball court. I'm just assuming you're going to fill those in.
Yes, this is in progress. It's there. Our cost estimator took a stab and pulled from various projects that she had very similar data recently that was very applicable. And she filled out as many as she could in a first pass.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can, and you can take direction from Peter, but I mean, the things that are tier 3 that were never listed on anything else, like a golf course. I don't think you need to bill us for having somebody look up to figure out how much a golf course would cost to put in the town of Tiburon. However,
Makes sense.
what's needed is there is sound abatement for a pickleball court. And I've actually forwarded that information that actually I received from somebody from the town public on what that costs. And that might be something you may want to add to your pickleball.
That would, yeah, and that would be a really important component that would differentiate tennis from pickleball.
Right, but it's also
Yeah.
just an important piece.
Yeah,
Thanks.
good feedback. Thank you. There was talk about trying to find it on here. Sort of linear exercise, adult exercise system. I'm trying to remember the name that was used in here. Peter, you're not familiar with that, are you? Kind of along the bike path, potentially,
The parkour.
fitness stations.
Parkour.
Park, yeah, so that's what I was gonna ask. Is that effectively a parkour? I mean, should we price it on that basis? Okay. And
I would say that MAC 5 also did earlier in this process, a deficiency study of the existing of the ranch. So I think that's also important and relevant.
yeah, we did the assessments of all the existing recreation facilities down to all of the existing restrooms, and we will be proposing or presenting cost models associated with addressing all of the current deficiencies in those facilities to bring them up to, top-notch shape and addressing accessibility issues, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and so forth. So that we've had previously presented the draft of that without the cost element. We haven't had any feedback on it or any comments, so we can go ahead and price that next. So we'll be developing the cost models for addressing the existing park facilities.
And I think you also included at some point all the existing infrastructure that we already have. So for example, you priced in a community center at, where is it? How many square, that 20,000 square feet. But yet we have community space already in the Belvedere Tiburon
Yes,
area.
we've done, and we did assessments of all those.
Right. So it might be interesting to say like, well, you could do a 20,000 square foot building, or you could look at all this collective number of spaces that you have,
Yeah.
and it's 15,000 square feet,
Yeah.
all for the price of nothing.
And
One thing that I've asked for this, and I don't think my pay grade isn't high enough, is the largest building in the Tiburon Belvedere area, which is the library, which is an unused space. And I'm not sure how we move forward on that, but it's created by a joint powers authority, just like the ranch. It's under the same auspices. So I don't know how we get that included, but I will continue to raise that in every meeting, because that is a community space and a community organization that is enormous of a building size. That costs about $10 million to build.
What we can do, Chuck, at our next month's subcommittee meeting, I'll invite Crystal to that one. We can maybe have an open dialogue with her and then take it to the board.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were careful about when we began to develop these models and inform me on what kind of a scale a community center might make sense was looking at the needs identified in the program element of your analysis, because you did both effectively the amenities as physical place and space, and then you did the needs and the program needs. And when you look at the program needs and you start to look at how many of those are unmet and how the amenities can start to meet those, that's where we really begin to see a clear presentation of unmet needs for relative to these amenities, and the scale of the amenities is trying to address specifically that. So you do have square footages available within rec facilities in town, but often they're accommodating a lot of current needs, but they're not necessarily meeting all of the unmet needs in the community. And I think, what you said about the library is a complicated little piece, because the city doesn't necessarily control it, but it could be meeting some of the unmet needs.
The town doesn't necessarily control the ranch either, but yet they're included. So I think
Yeah.
we need to be consistent on this.
Okay, do we want to get through this presentation?
Mhm.
Is there more
No,
to present?
We're very close, but yeah, we can just wrap it up. Do you advance it? Yeah, here we go. So we also looked at the other elements of the total cost of ownership. This was work done by Pros Consulting as a member of our team, and they met with town staff, Public Works, and started by naming all of the lines of service that are currently being maintained, or that is represented by the maintenance work done by the town, just to call attention to the complexity and the level of all the different needs of our spaces and places. That analysis resulted in, so pros consulting, drawing on, drawing on a national practice, and their sense of best practice staffing. They would find, the need for about 5.5 FTE to maintain Tiburon's, 2 miles of hard surface trail, 55 acres of hard surface parks, and 257 acres of open space. And currently Tiburon has about 4.5 FTE in the budget. So we're a one full-time person short. But also want to note that the green team is instrumental in Tiburon in helping to maintain certain facilities. They do a beautiful job and provide 1,000 to 1,500 hours, thank you, Chuck, in volunteer work on park maintenance every year. And so that translates to, about half an FTE or even more. Then we look at operational costs, so not staff, but the cost of operating the maintenance work. And that comes out to an estimated recommended funding annually of about close to 1.2 million. And we're a little shy of that. We're about 100,000 shy of that in the current budgeting process. And again, actually, if you scroll back to that, the green team has an annual budget of 27,000, which helps to close that gap. We also looked at funding strategies and did a workshop with various members of town staff and tested a range of funding sources, some that are currently used and some that may not be used, but are definitely on the radar, some that may not be on the radar yet, but could come into play in the future to be part of a strategy of funding the kinds of improvements we're talking about. So the categories here, we see external funding sources like partnerships, private donations, and volunteerism. Those are types of external funding sources that were found to have high sort of synergy with Tiburon. Capital fees, a lot of communities make a lot of use of development impact fees. Maybe it's a little bit less of a piece of the pie here because we're not in a sort of outward development mode with large developers coming in with projects, but it's still a piece. And then we have user fees. There's a lot of prevalence or a lot of value in recreation service fees, fees for renting facilities, and reservations and so on. Tax support obviously is kind of critical and fundamental. Other things beyond property taxes are a little bit less part of the picture here, but could play more of a role or do have a medium kind of impact. And then franchises and licenses, a whole bunch of different kind of examples of this, but I think the one that was found to have the strongest connection for Tiburon is interlocal agreements. And this is potentially really promising, could be a really important piece of a swimming puzzle, for example, if the town wasn't wanting to build a pool, could maybe strengthen agreements with other providers who do have pools. So next steps, we're going to be doing a community workshop very soon, June 14th, Friday night on Main, and testing these ideas. So we're going to be pulling the material you're seeing tonight into a more simplified, much more simplified mode to present to community members and get out in front. And I think also a key thing here is to get feedback on things that where we have questions still. And we will then be going to town council, hopefully later in June, but I think that's TBD, going back to the post subcommittee, reporting on what we hear, working on the draft plan and bringing a draft to town council, hopefully in August. There's some more work again with this committee before we go again back to town council to finalize hopefully in October.
Okay,
That's it. Yes. So thank you. Thank you very much I know this is a very long presentation, a lot of material. Thank you for your patience, everyone. And let's hear your dialogue.
okay, thank you to the team at WRT, Peter, Olivia, and David. Really appreciate all the time and work you've spent on laying all this out and doing the research and engaging the community. we're going to turn to commissioner questions, which in large part were asked throughout the presentation, but I think we should give more chance for questions. Then we'll do public comment, and then we'll do commissioner discussion. So any questions?
On the operating costs for the projects, like in the high priority column. I was wondering if you were going to be looking into that a little bit more, or if, because the operating or cost of ownership was more dealing with parks and trails. But I don't have a sense, for example, like what is the cost of ownership on an ongoing basis to run a pool or a community center? So I'm wondering if that's part of the scope or something you're looking into.
Yeah, actually, we will be providing at least qualitative information about recreational programming and the costs of managing the programs. Is that what you're referring to?
And facilities too?
Yes, I believe that actually may have been captured in the FTE and maintenance. No, this was just the hard surface trails, the parks and the open spaces. I will follow up with Pros Consulting and see if we are also get information on the facilities.
Yeah, it might need to be a scalable per square foot. So that it can be scalable with the scale of the amenities.
Like possible to add another column that says like per square foot, you know, per the square footage per year, something for operating costs?
Mhm. I think that's something we can get, yeah.
Go for it. Go for it. No.
Hi, thanks again, you guys. On the cost that Commissioner Moon mentioned, you might just, I forward on to Peter 2 line items from the Mill Valley from their budget on the cost for running the rec center and cost for running the pool and the gym. So there's a cost of ownership. So
Yep.
I would recommend the public records for you guys to look at that stuff. Might be a nice comparable for you. First on the June 14th, again, thanks again for all the material, you guys. On the June 14th event, how can we help? Can we reach out to people? Can we be at Friday nights on Main saying, hey, come on over here? I mean, I tend to be shy within the community, but maybe my other colleagues would say that tongue in cheek. But how can we help and where will you be located so we can tell people? Have you guys got that far or?
Yeah, I think.
Oh, you'll be the chamber?
Yeah, we'll be in the chambers, the chamber building.
So down at the end of Main Street
Correct.
by Salt and Pepper. Okay, great. All right.
That's a great question. Please, please speak to your friends and family and members of the community.
And
Yeah.
is there a time that you're going to be there? Is it kind of open house?
I think we talked about time, but I can't remember what it was now. Do you remember now, Olivia?
Okay, super. Okay, great. Thank you. Specifically on the presentation, just a question I have, and the principles piece, so I'm going way back to the beginning. I love that, and thank you for adding that. Where is that? I also appreciate all the effort and time that put into all these slides. So in the draft guiding principles, is there anything that you needed from us on feedback on those 5? You'd mentioned that you wanted some. As we go to discussion, is that like a priority? Like, yeah, this is good, or just so fellow commissioners, if you want to, I'm kind of teeing that question up for discussion.
Yeah, we'd
Later.
love to get feedback on that.
Okay. And then one of the things, and I know you've kept it there and I appreciate it and I value it, but on draft policies on environment, I get the protect the sensitive nature, natural communities, and we heard that from the community. I'd love that. There are other bullet point items on here that we've really never discussed or never have bubbled up in any community discussion. I see their value. However, I think that if they're here, they then will be distractions for more important things. So like, for example, like the rain gardens and piece. I get why they're important. Is there a reason why they're still there?
That's also a good question. I think the reason the rain gardens are there is we have envisioned a trail system that connects downtown up into the hills and to the bay. And that trail system could actually follow along stormwater improvements along Beach Road, where there could be this nice synergy, and stormwater improvements or rain gardens, as we're calling them, could become part of a trail system. That's the sort of the tie-in. But I also hear you. It hasn't been something that the community has talked about much.
So, thank you. And then last question on site considerations access. I don't know that number of that slide. That's the first one. On the blue highlighting, so you have around the parking, so this is down at McKegney and Blackie's. Is the lighter blue highlighting around the different areas because of the bus stops?
Bus stops and access points, entrances into the park.
Okay, because while I would love for us to be a bus community, Tiburon and Belvedere they don't ride Marin Transit number 217 very often. You could probably get the numbers from Marin Transit, so I just don't want that to be overplayed a little bit. So just an observation, but thank you for that clarification. Those are all my questions. Thank you, Chair.
I would love for you to unpack the process. Just like, what are we gonna get out of this? What is the final, not the process, sorry, the final outcome? At the end of this process, what will the result be? What can the community expect to see?
Great question. I think what I'm envisioning is a document, a plan. That's going to be a very familiar looking thing. You turn pages electronically or physically, and we would start with an introduction that frames what this is about. We would describe in summary what we learned about the parks and recreation system through the analysis. We would describe in summary what we learned from the community in terms of priorities. And then we would establish the guiding principles, just kind of walk through what we did right now today, actually. Guiding principles, decision-making framework, and then each element of the decision-making framework. And I think it would be probably good to still include concept drawings of how park elements could lay out in the park, but we could also not. We have developed that material, and it could be shown as an illustrative or not. And again, we totally welcome your feedback on how you'd like that document to be most useful to you.
Okay.
May I ask a follow-up on that question?
Yeah.
Sorry, thanks, Chair. So just to kind of dig a little bit more into that, will the final product have any specific recommendations, like based on all this feedback and based on these priorities and based on the costs that we do recommend that like a community pool makes sense for Tiburon? Or will there be, by design, avoiding making any specific recommendations on any of these projects?
I think we need clear guidance from you and from council on that. The last guidance that we got was to step back from specific recommendations.
Got it.
Yeah, town council asked for less specifics and more general, which is why we now have zone A1, A2, A3.
One other question while I have the mic, if I may. Other than the community open house, then will there be other opportunities for additional feedback after that community open house? Mostly asking because I'm out of town that night, unfortunately, and I'm not going to be there. But I'm just curious that like what those other opportunities will be, and then could that impact the PIR rankings in any way on any of these projects between now and when the final adoption happens?
Yes, so between now and the final adoption, we'll have the one community workshop. We'll have two town council meetings and one more post-commission meeting. And we are getting feedback off the website that folks are either signing up with their emails or providing feedback, and all that feedback is being forwarded over to WRT as well.
Okay.
So so basically, yeah, so 2 more town council meetings, public forums and a post, so 3 additional. I just want to let the commission know for this meeting this evening, we have about 140 folks that signed up to receive notification, and all 140 folks were notified of this meeting, and a link with the agenda was sent to them, and we have 5 attendees online and 3 in chambers.
We do get a steady stream of comments on tiburonparks.com. I always forget this. And so I'm giving another plug to the website, and there's a comment feature.
Thank you.
Another question on the zones. I thought I saw in here a place where you identified what's possible in each zone. Is that right? Which slide was that?
Yeah, we were calling it typical uses. That's another, I think you're raising potentially a question there, which is around, prohibiting or allowing or recommending.
What slide is that? 37? Okay, let's see. So I think, because I think we're gonna need at least an assessment of which options are available on which sites. It's clear that we end this process without a plan about what to do with our parks. And we end this process with just options for siting and against sort of a filter of what the community prioritizes and costs, which is great. But from that, we need to take that final product and then kind of get to a place where we're making a recommendation to the town council on what we would actually like to see in which zone. And then the town council needs to make decisions. But I don't think we can do our part unless you use the expertise and research that you have to give us the specific options for each zone. Is that possible?
So that is what we've tried to do. We have a typical uses column, and I think that could be more detailed. That could become more specific.
Yeah, like if you take everything that you ranked and everything that you're pricing, and I agree with Chuck, I don't think you need to price out the low priority. I would keep pricing to like high and medium. Just leave off low priority. But if we could see where all the high and medium use or, facilities or uses could go in terms of options, I think that gives us enough expert information to then as post make recommendations on what we'd like to see based on all of the community engagement and
And just I appreciate you quoting me, but I just want to make sure it's like some things that are low priority that may be like feasible, like a skate park, right? That was low priority. My comment was more like a golf course. I don't see a Jack Nicklaus designed 18-hole golf course being built here anytime soon.
It's interesting because the golf course actually is a medium priority and the skate park is the lowest priority.
I know, but I'm just saying that I don't see an 18-hole.
We have a potential implementation or funding path toward the skate park, so it makes it more relevant.
Yep. Yeah, maybe we can, can we elevate things like that just for that reason? I mean, that does seem to be a cause for elevating, and maybe, yeah.
Is there a way, this is a question for David, is there a way for us to get from the council some parameters around cost so that we can filter out, like we can make a cost filter? So that we're only asking WRT to do all this siting possibility on the things that we could potentially ever, build.
At the last council meeting, I believe few of the council members mentioned, once this plan is passed, don't expect these to be built within the next couple of years. Some may never be built and some we may wait 10 years for, but they never really established a dollar amount. But
Okay. So for that reason, it's worth taking it all into account.
And that's the reason why they don't want a specific site labeled with a specific amenity. They want to keep it open to where, let's just say, for instance, pickleball, pickleball can go into, site A1, A2 and Heather Park. And at that point, in a year from now and 2 years from now, when that comes forth before them, they'll be able to make a decision based on a preliminary cost estimate, what it would cost.
Yeah, okay. Well, rescind my request.
Because, a lot of these numbers that they're giving us now, in a year from now, they'll probably be about $500,000 too low.
Yeah,
Seeing what cost, how costs are moving up every day.
I mean, I still think it would be useful. I
Dollars.
still think my request to WRT would be useful if you can do that, if it's in scope, to give us the siting possibilities. Rescind the request to try to figure out from town council what the cost parameters are, because if there's no like time horizon, then it could be any cost. Tim, I think you were gonna ask a question. Commissioner Burr.
But I do see one thing that I think will be real helpful for Post moving forward on any of these amenities is if WRT can maybe create what you were talking about. We have the zone map that they have with the A1, A2, EEP, all of those on there. And then below that, a legend with all the amenities labeled as 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 100. And then with a little circle where they can go in that map. So 1 can be in 5 different places, 2 can be in 30 different places, but they can kind of give you an idea. If someone comes before a Post and says, we want a beach or a sand volleyball court. All right, the decision tree on this map here, it can go here, 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 and here, and then move forward. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a really good structure.
Great. Great, thank you. Other questions? If not, we'll move. I see members of the community, so any other questions? Were you gonna? Okay. Let's move to the community comments and questions then. So we'll ask you to come, we'll take the people in person first, and then we'll go online. Just ask you to come to the microphone. Make sure you hit that button and you see the red light on the microphone. Please introduce yourself and you'll have 3 minutes for your comments.
Good evening. My name is Bruce King. I live on Hacienda Drive. And I first want to apologize to Francisco. When I read his May 1st article, I anticipated that tonight we would get a list of passive and active activities, which was a request, but I guess I misunderstood. Regarding the Parks and Recreation Plan, I have attended the pop-ups, the town hall meetings, the virtual meetings, and I read the ARC. I've had a frustrating conversation with Commissioner McInerney. I had a more frustrating conversation with Commissioner Hornbrook. Tried to discuss and ended up emailing important information directly to Peter Winch, and have spoken to the town council multiple times regarding my concerns about the WRT presentation. Today, I could also speak about my concerns regarding this presentation. However, I don't think it's necessary. Good. I don't think anybody anticipated the letter from the Green Team when they mentioned that the town and the Green Team together do not have the bandwidth to maintain the town facilities or any of the new proposed facilities that could be recommended in this presentation. By the way, the town council hadn't seen that letter as of yesterday. More importantly, I don't think the town could have, the commission could have anticipated that the town said that they don't expect that they would have the money or the ability to fund any of these projects for the next 5 to 10 years. Okay. I attended the capital improvement budget yesterday. There was only one item regarding parks, and it was the remaining fee for WRT. I'm sure you may have heard the saying, all dressed up but no place to go. With all the hard work that WRT and the commissions have done, I think you're all dressed up and you have no place to go. I attended to avoid criticisms of WRT's work today, but I happened to read or see the aerial map published in today's ARC. And I thought how this type of map could be an improvement to the WRT schedules. Well, it's not my decision. I would recommend that your current work just be put on hold and stop spending money. You never know what's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years, and you may be spending money that you can't go to the dance. I would be happy to address some of my concerns with the WRT proposal with Peter and David, that the original presentation could have some improvements and these issues could be resolved quickly. I'd appreciate being helpful, but those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, yeah, thank you.
I haven't done public speaking for a while, so just thank you very much for sharing all this information today and for giving the public a chance to weigh in again. My name's Jenna McKnight. I'm a mom here in Tiburon and I live in the Bel Air neighborhood. This is the 6th meeting I've attended in regards to the plan in terms of the workshops and the focus groups. I'm a part of a local group of parents who are very invested in this plan and the Parks and Recreation system in general. And we actually are taking turns attending these different meetings and sharing information that we collect during these meetings with each other. You might have seen that I was texting a lot during the meeting because I was sending out the slides, and I think some of the other parents are on the Zoom call. Many of us have young kids and it's really hard to attend these meetings, especially in the evening. So hence the reason we're kind of taking turns and trying to make sure that our voices are heard. I'd say overall, we felt as a group sort of discouraged by the feedback from certain town council members during the March meeting and also some of their comments in the newspaper coverage in the ARC. We individually have our own priorities, but we are aligned on some ideas. And in general, we're interested in some of the big amenities that have been discussed, like the community center and the swimming pool. But I really want to emphasize that we're also very, very interested in some of the easier wins and lower cost items. And in general, these concern better maintenance of our existing parks and facilities. So in terms of the parks, we'd love to see the upgrades to the playground equipment, particularly at Cypress Hollow, which is the only playground in Tiburon that you can park next to and walk to, in just a couple minutes. The park at Blackie's Pasture is great, but it's just a long walk from the parking lot. We'd like to see more shaded picnic areas. There's really not a great place in Tiburon to even have a small birthday party for a child right now. We'd love to see better landscaping, and we'd love to see better maintenance overall of the landscaping, like regularly mowing the lawn, emptying the trash can, and helping address the dog feces issue. I brought just a picture just to illustrate. This is Bel Air Park, which is in my neighborhood. I have copies if you want one. This is taken last month. This is my son walking through the park. As you can see, the grass is up to his waist. There's one picnic bench there, and it's not a pleasurable place to be, especially with the uptick in ticks in the area. And this is one of our neighborhood parks, and I'm just surprised that given the large percentage of families with young children or school-age children in this town, that we're not taking better care of our existing parks.
I hate to cut you off, but you are at time, so if you want to just try to wrap.
Sure. I'm actually almost done. So another thing we'd love to see is just a map of the existing parks and trails in Tiburon, like a digital map and a physical map that's posted to the different parks. And then I had a couple questions. I'd love to know how many people responded to this survey. You said it was statistically significant, so just would love to know that number. I'd love to know if there's an opportunity to maybe issue another survey. I know that's a huge undertaking, but the fact that playgrounds weren't included in some of the other things, I think is an omission. And I also curious why the neighborhood parks weren't on the maps that were shown with the zone 1, 2, 3, unless I missed them. And then will these slides be posted on the town website? They are. Okay. So thank you so much. Appreciate. the
Thank
time.
you.
3 minutes went fast.
Hi, my name's Mike Shepherd. I've been a resident for 27 years. I live a little on the downtown side, past, along the trail, past the old rail trail, past south of Knoll Park. But I'm in the park every day, many days, multiple times, usually walking the dog the whole length of the Richardson Bay Lineal Park. And I have been at a number of these sessions, and I appreciate being heard. And it looks like a number of the things that I and others have said have been taken into account in WRT's work. I'm a fan of it, and I think it's great. So I just have a few points based on what was discussed today that I ask you to consider. One is there was mention that there were objections to building something or doing something in the sanitary district pond area. I'm not sure what those objections would be. There's already a building there, and there's going to be a building there forever. I fear the sanitary district's own building. Right now, there's a horrible looking wire fence there. So whatever we put there, whatever the town puts there, is going to be better than the way it looks now. So I don't think there should be any hesitation about doing something there. And the town is crying out for additional uses. That's a good place for it. I'd like to think that the home run for me would be to be able to do something downtown, understanding we don't own it, but do something downtown to bring people downtown and support the businesses downtown. I think that's a home run for everybody if that can be pulled off. And then you have two spaces where you can provide amenities to people in the town who want, and it seems like there are a lot of people who want them and will use them, and that would be great. Small point, I think the priorities slide had it right in terms of noisy uses, and I don't include only pickleball here, but any noisy use, it should be that it isn't going to create negative impacts, and that is one of that's in the town council slide. The community feedback slide is a little different, just saying it should be considered. I think the town council has it right there. And by that, I don't mean that we shouldn't do those things. I think we just need to make sure that isn't negatively impacting the neighbors. I think we should be willing to spend the money and do it so that we have the facilities and we're not negatively impacting the neighbors. Some of the friends of mine who actually live on South.
Give you a wrap up warning.
Okay.
You're over time, but
I appreciate
we'll
that.
let you wrap.
Thanks. Those friends who have been at a number of these meetings but are not here tonight, I think would note on the A3 and the P2, which include some of that space right along the houses at south of Knoll Park. Those are different than the other spaces because they don't have Tiburon Boulevard in between. And I think you should take that into account. Those spaces need much more protection than the ones that have Tiburon Boulevard in between. And just as on a parting note, one of the big issues along the trail is speeding electric bicycles. And I note that was not addressed tonight. That may be just because it's only an enforcement issue and there's nothing more that can be done. But I would be interested in hearing whether there are any like topographical or other solutions as part of some of these changes that could mitigate the problem.
Thank you
Thanks
very
very
much. Thank you. Do we have any comments from online?
Can I make one comment? Mike, I think one of the town council members was against other buildings in the park, not building at the sanitary site, if that's a clarification. Yep.
We do, Chair.
Okay, let's,
Oh.
okay, please step to the mic, introduce yourself.
I was at the grocery store. Leaving tomorrow and I have little kids. Hi, I'm Beth Mix. I was at the last meeting. I just want to echo everything that Jenna mentioned, as well as this last gentleman that spoke. There's a huge group that's super supportive of all of these wonderful ideas and also sensitive to preserving the iconic nature of Tiburon, which is how people like me even moved here. I came out here with coworkers to Sam's, used to go hiking. So I think I just want to add that there's just a really large group of people with children of all ages. Also just people that want more activities. I would say the main thing I wanted to bring up was after I attended the last meeting, there was an article in the ARC that it said it's unlikely any of these wonderful ideas that sounded like had a ton of support from the local survey were even going to happen. And at most it'd be one. That was really disheartening if you'd want people to participate in this process. We want to see results. So I actually completely disagree with the person that spoke earlier about how, you know, with the dress to the dance, we're ready to dance. Like there's people out there that want to make this happen. And I'd like to know what is 1 year from now, what's 2, 5, 10, what's also just, you know, maybe there's some pie in the sky ideas that you need some really generous fundraiser, but I think I'd love to start talking about what's actually going to happen. I think we have all these great ideas. I've been really impressed with the presentation, and I think each feedback cycle gets better and better, and it's been very considerate of people's feedback and neighbors and all of those things. So I just want to echo that there's a huge group that's very interested in all of this and supportive, and we'd like to know what you need from us to make this happen in the next year, 2, 5, 10 years. My children are 4 and 2, so saying that there's just no one ready to dance is actually really, I vehemently disagree, because the children are the future. And there's also a major mental health crisis for teenagers and college kids, and they just need stuff to do. And we have beauty around us that we can take advantage of to let children and youth and even adults really enjoy and use that as an outlet. So I would love to see what the actions are. And thanks for letting us participate. And I was listening on the phone, so thank you. I look forward to actually reviewing the slides in more detail.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we can go to the people online now.
Yes. Believe we have Janu. Can you hear?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay.
Hi there. I am Janu Gordon. I live at 160 Solano Street. I'm part of this group of parents that Beth is talking about, and that Jenna referenced, that we're ready to dance. I think you know, I just want to make sure that our lack of physical presence in the meeting today and online I want to be clear that that does not represent our or reflect our enthusiasm. We are a mighty group. We have WhatsApp groups, we have text groups of 20, 30 parents and residents who are really passionate about specifically playgrounds, parks, and pools in Tiburon. And just echoing what Beth and Jenna said, we want to do anything in our power to help advocate for these projects to get off the ground. Understand there's a lot that goes into this and appreciate everyone's work here on trying to make this happen. We just want to be part of the execution, sort of operationalizing of all these great ideas. So just wanted to lend my enthusiasm and let folks know that there's a lot of interest here, and just we can't always make it to the meetings, but we are passionate about trying to make this happen and want to do whatever we can to help out. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Other folks?
Yes. We have Emily.
Yes, hello, this is Emily. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful, thank you. My name is Emily Chiswick Patterson. I am also a parent here in Tiburon. I've been a resident for approaching a decade and been able to participate in a number of the outreach effort meetings through WRT over the past many months. And really for a town that supports its children so well in so many ways here, I'm really excited to see more at the park level. I'm really wonderful to hear about some of the proposals and some of the options that are on the table here. I do echo the other parents who've spoken, and I think many of you there understand this, that the natural consequences of young children is it's hard to get to these meetings, right? This is dinner time, bath time, PJ time, et cetera. And so I do think that not just in a meeting like this, but in even many of the outreach meetings, we're likely underrepresenting some of the people who are really heavy users of our parks and open spaces between the hours of say 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., not including naps, but who aren't able to come and represent as much as we'd like. Seeing things like playgrounds and pools and even splash pads come up here is really great and really exciting. And I do hope the committee and the council are able to hear these proposals and really consider how well we can serve our multi-generational town well, and really making some improvements and adding some amenities that allow not just children, that's clearly where much of my focus lies, but allow the multi-generational town to be able to access and use our nature so well. We are so lucky to live in a part of the world that we live in, and to be able to make the best use of that is something that is very exciting. I do want to note that overarchingly, I love the big long-term planning, and I understand that that is the focus of this meeting, but I want to make sure that the committee and the council hear too a real call from people, call from us citizens to make sure that we're capturing some of the easier wins in the short term. How do we mow the grass? How do we add and empty trash cans consistently? How do we take care of the dog waste issues that makes using some of these parks so difficult? How do we create a map of the parks and trails that exist and just get that out there and accessible to the public? It feels like there's a lot of things in terms of sort of maintenance and care for the amenities that we already do have that would make them much more accessible, much more usable. And then I certainly am interested in hearing from the committee and from the council, how do we as citizens support actually getting some of these bigger long-term ideas done in 1, 5, 10 years, not just a lovely PowerPoint presentation that gets filed in a drawer, but really allows some of these great ideas to come to fruition in support of our town.
Thank you very much. No others?
No.
Okay. So with that, we'll wrap the public comment and we'll go to commissioner discussion. I know there's a lot to discuss, so let's get into it. Anybody want to start us off?
I'm happy to take a first stab here. I think I got some of my thoughts lined up. Big thank you obviously to WRT and the rest of the team on presentation tonight. And it's been fun watching this process develop. And thank you, David, for all your feedback on this. I think, first, I just kind of want to start with were my priorities, and I stated them last time. WRT wasn't here, but Commissioner Hornbrook did a good job presenting, and I laid it out there where my priorities are, just so it's out there if anyone cares. My priorities remain, this is not in order, but I really, my 5 priorities remain, and part of the reason why I wanted to join POST in the first place, it's the playgrounds. It's prioritizing the upgrades to each of the existing play structures that we have. Those are easy wins. I would agree with some of the comments tonight. A pool, while that may be a project that takes a while to come to fruition, I think when I joined POST, that was just felt like it was a North Star, but now with the acquisition of the ponds, it becomes a much more realistic opportunity, and I think that has to stack rank high. I've been very clear over my time on this commission that both the skate park as well as the bike pump track park are priorities, I think, for our kids. You know, we see feedback on here about like creating a teen hangout location. I'm not sure exactly what that might mean or might look like, but when you do create opportunities for them to engage in physical activity and sport, you know, not just on McKegney, but for those kids who might want to enjoy a skate park or a bike pump track, I really think those are big wins that this town could have. We're seeing energy in neighboring towns and other communities around a skate park without question. You know, Corte Madera is going through that now, and it's encouraging to see. And then on the bike pump track park, I'll just remind folks that during the pandemic, you know, this it may not it may not have shown up on the feedback from the community sessions, but you know, there were middle school kids and kids of all ages, and let's be clear, adults who were utilizing some of the land over by what's the park back there? The Belveron Mini Park, as well as yeah, I think the kids were already utilizing that area and kind of building their own areas like for bike usage. And I just think that those are some wins that I hope you know, we see get pumped up in this process as it moves forward. And then finally, and I made this pitch last time, just connecting the open spaces and particularly the Ridge Trail. I mean, that showed up on here, but I didn't see any really specifics on that as the plan moved forward, just mostly because obviously it's focused on McKegney Green and the Lineal Park area. So those are my priorities. Now on comments overall, what to do to community members. I mean, this is such an important opportunity for all of us to engage. So I encourage the folks who participated tonight and are participating online, including myself and my, you know, friends and community in town. We got to make sure people are continuing to engage because this is a really important moment. And we want to support action in moving these projects forward, even though some of them may take some time. But I also want to make sure that there's room for future projects that may not, as this list, you know, kind of sets out the priorities. You know, I do think that there's some quote low PIR projects in here that could be realistic moving forward. So I hope that whatever final recommendation has makes it clear that things that might be ranked low doesn't necessarily mean that's a barrier for the future. But then there's the unrealistic things like building a golf course in today's day and age in town. And I also would agree with some of the public comments tonight that it does seem like a little bit of a miss not to have some more feedback on some of the neighborhood parks. Again, the Belveron Mini Park, Cypress Hollow, Bel Air, the other parks like that. Those are, you know, I'd just be curious to see if some of these projects that we've talked about could fit in any of those places. Which leads me to, I'm a little, you know, I didn't have an opportunity to attend or watch the last town council meeting, but it's a little curious to me if WRT was prepared and looking to make some specific recommendations for some of these locations or had renderings of them, and that is included in the scope of work that the town has directed WRT to do as part of this report. I would like to see some of that. So you know, I don't want to divert from what town council, where they've given you direction, but I'm a little unclear why a visual of some of these top priority projects, such as a pool, why that would not be helpful moving forward as we get towards that last draft. So I would encourage, you know, at least on some of those top projects, I would like to see some renderings and get a sense of what those actually might look like. I feel like it would be a big miss to come to the end of the projects. And while I love the frameworks for decisions, and I particularly like the guiding principles, I was hammering at those, trying to figure out where I could have feedback. And I think those were a big win. I don't really have any specific feedback on this because I like what WRT did with those. I do think it would be good to see some more specific ideas. And it doesn't, it doesn't have to be like an overall, this is what we recommend, but I mean, there's only so many places where we could put a pool. There's only so many places where, you could put something like a pump track or a pickleball court. And I know we've talked about that today, but it would be good to see, I think, some of that stuff in the design. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I might come in now because I think I have some comments that relate to that. WRT did do a prior version. In our last meeting, we saw a draft that did have renderings, right?
Yes.
So did the town council ask, I mean, I know they said that we don't want specifics, but can we, I mean, since we're asking to see what's possible in which zones, the renderings only depicted one of the, it sort of took the suite of options and sort of made choices. But David's solution, I think covers what we're looking to understand, which is all the options in all the zones. And so I don't know if that needs to be a picture or just some sort of graph or chart, but I do think it would be, I agree with Commissioner Burr that it would be useful for us to know what's possible where. And I think they said they could do that. And so I think that could cover it. I would like to see what's possible in the other park spaces, in the other spaces we have to work with. And I can't recall whether there was feedback that pointed you only to show, like to only focus on Lineal Park, but I would like to resurface the possibility of seeing these other placements and other sightings and what we can do with existing parks. Is that something that we can see?
Well, yeah, first of all, I would say I think we can probably thread this needle a bit. I was trying to present new information, so wasn't re-presenting material from the last meeting. But I think there are specific recommendations that can be made for each site that may stop short of calling for specific recreation amenity additions, but may indicate here are the issues with this site that should be addressed. For example, to replace the playground and play structure at Cypress Hollow Park. That's a pretty straightforward recommendation. And I think we can make recommendations like that at each site and recommend the types of improvements that can be considered at each site.
Yeah, and I think also what I saw in the last meeting that was really useful, that I think would be useful applied as a layer on to this, what we're asking for, is in the last one, you had some information about accessibility. And that is what would inform decisions about what we put in which zone. For example, the treatment ponds are far enough from the parking lot that it might be better to put something with lower like per capita volume rather than higher per capita. So like, for example, like courts instead of a swimming pool or something where you would need less parking. I think those siting considerations would be useful to have in the picture. And I know you already did that. So if there's just a way to like put it all there, because I think that is what's going to inform what our recommendations are for certain sites. The other thing that I want to underscore that we heard from the public tonight was the sequencing and getting some early action and early wins. I think we as Post can look at, what you bring to us, like the next sort of round, and we can make those recommendations based on what we think is like easiest to do, quickest. But I agree that it's really crucial that we do some of the low-hanging fruit soon. And I completely disagree with whoever it was quoted in the ARC that said that nothing's going to happen. I disagree. We are going to make improvements. Things will happen in our parks. The community is demanding it. Frankly, every community should expect something to happen in its parks that is good, some improvements to be made. And that's why Post exists. And so I appreciate those who came forward and urged action. I expect action. And I think it's a reasonable thing to expect. with that, I will, see. Oh, the other thing I wanted, sorry, one more thing on the zone. In a prior draft, there was also like, along with the accessibility considerations that would guide where you put something. Like how far do how many people have to walk to get to this thing? So don't put something with a high volume of people here. Or put things like that are more active in further walking zones, et cetera, for accessibility reasons. I also saw in the last version, you had us, and the town council gave feedback on it, that there were comments on which zones would be more passive and which would be more active. And I think it would be useful to bring that back into the document, because we did already hear useful feedback both from the community and from the town council on that. So that's it. Thank you.
Chair Judge, may I make one quick comment?
Sure.
You know, I probably should have reviewed the last presentation before this evening, because a lot of the stuff I was asking for just now, I mean, you did do that work, and we had Commissioner Hornbrook presenting, if I'm not mistaken, so we didn't have an opportunity to have this back and forth with the staff. So threading the needle seems to be the right word for that. A lot of this work, has definitely been done, but I think it's going to really help build excitement amongst folks in the community when they see this comes to life, in even if it's just recommendations or what could be possible, as opposed to just this one section. There's not a whole lot of excitement about P1, P2, and P3. But if our kids can see that, this upgraded playground can be right here by south of the Knoll next to whatever else, it might be a picnic area. I do think that's going to build continued community excitement. So I just wanted to add on to that. Thank you.
Thanks.
So something I really want to point out, I had it in my notes. And it was in the presentation, and it's Green Team's incredible contribution to this town. We would not have the old rail trail that we have if the Green Team was not maintaining for us. The head of the Green Team, Jim Wood, or one of the heads, used to be on Post, and we did a report that was accepted by Post and accepted by town council about 5 years ago. It was called Nature-Based Enhancements and Management of the Old Rail Trail, something like that. We looked at the FTE, and 5 years ago, we told the town that we didn't have enough maintenance. And so this is not something new that's coming to light. We have known for at least 5 years that we do not have enough staffing to maintain our parks in the way that people would like them maintained. And so if we don't like the way that the parks are maintained, I would recommend writing to your town council members and telling them that you would like more maintenance for the parks. Thank you so much for this presentation. Every time you guys do these, they get more clear. I feel like we're less in the mud and heading towards something that's tangible, and that isn't like, sometimes in the beginning, I was like, oh my gosh, it's all falling through my hands. I can't grasp any of this. It's such a big concept, because today, yes, we focused on Richardson Bay Lineal Park primarily, but there's so many other little parks and little pieces, and it's really super complicated, and there isn't one right answer. And there's going to be people that are happy, and there's going to be people who are less happy. And, part of life is change and evolution. I was at a Corte Madera town council meeting. Yeah, it wasn't the parks, it was a town council member. And they were complaining about pickleball noise. They were complaining about skate park being built. Full transparency, I'm on the Scotty Lapp Foundation, which is renovating that skate park. And what the town council member said was, you know what, These are sounds of life. This is sounds of life. This is the sounds of kids playing in the park. This is the sounds of people having fun with their friends. It's not meant to be totally devoid of sound. So I just want, like, when people are not so happy about change or feeling like things need to stay the same, we're not trying to totally renovate the entire park all at once, but we want to have the sounds of life. We want to have our community out there making friendships and connections to their friends. And I have this other related thing that I wrote earlier today to the consultant team. I am having a really hard time reconciling the statistically valid survey, which, when we went over all that information many, many months ago, was primarily 60 years old, the majority of those people. So when we're looking at those things that were high priority, it's by people that their kids have already grown. They don't have a priority for their kids at the playgrounds. They don't have a priority for their kid to have a skate park or a pump track or any of these other things that are more for what we're hearing from people when they come in person with the community feedback, which has been a much younger audience and demographic. And I'm really feeling that we're missing one of the biggest parts of our community, and they're voiceless because they don't vote. And they're kind of, I don't want to call them invisible, but they're kids, right? We've had kids over the years come to our post meetings and ask for things and say, hey, we don't have this in town and we want something. And we listen to them and we shake our heads and we agree because we have kids. I have 3 kids, when we all agree, we need to do something in this town, we should do it. But then nothing happens. We don't move the ball forward, and that's on us. We're not moving it. Town council isn't moving it forward, but these kids are coming to adults and asking for help. And they're saying, we don't have anything to do in town. We want you to hear us. And we just shake our heads and say, yeah. And that's not okay. We need to actually listen to these kids that are coming to us and saying, we don't have anything to do besides hanging out at CVS. It's kind of a joke, like, oh, we hung out at CVS today. It's not funny when it's actually your life and your reality. And that's where your teenager's hanging out. Because if we don't give them something constructive to do, they will find something very unconstructive to do with their time. And I really don't want my kids to go down that road. And 2 of them are already driving, so they're leaving town and finding other things to do. But my 13-year-old is the one sitting at CVS and sometimes going to the library and sometimes, you know, going to TPC because we're members there, but she doesn't have anything to do. She has no way to connect with other young kids in town. She's too old for the playgrounds. What does she do? Where does she go? She's not gonna really get into good things going forward if we don't give them something. And I understand she's gonna be probably 16 and driving and getting herself out of town to go see her friends by the time any of this is built. But I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for your kids because they're young. I'm doing it for Tim's kids because they're young. And by the time they're old enough, maybe they'll have something to do where they don't have to leave town and we don't have to sit here and watch for another kid to say, hey, I don't have anything to do. So I agree, we need to move forward. I agree, this is all needed. I love the fact that we have these zones. I love the fact that we have things that can go into these different zones, that they're, I don't want to call it an a la carte menu, but kind of is an a la carte menu. And I really think that we need to tell the post commission and town council and town staff that, listen, we want to take care of our parks. We want our kids to have things to do, and we're not going to take no for an answer, or we'll vote you out and we'll put somebody in there that will do it. So if your answer is we're not going to do something for 5 years, maybe you shouldn't be on town council. But I do agree that town council will do something. So, and I'm not going to say anything about a pool. I'm going to step away from that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for the time. Again, thanks to everybody for your efforts and on this, just a couple quick comments. If we could include the cost for the different playground enhancements, that would be great. I think maybe, David, if there's something in there, this is a request that we've made since I've been in this town, is maps for the parks and the trails. There is, I was at I got selected to be on a focus group for the Marin Transit. I just sign up for these things. They call me. And people actually asked that were outside the community. They're like, do you guys want us to come to your town? Because there isn't any maps and the bus rarely goes. And I was like, well, no, actually, they made the decision on reducing the number of times that the 217 comes down here. But the maps and things, I think, is something that we're missing. So I don't know if it's possible for staff to just provide that information, to say like, this is the lift that we need in terms of FTE to do that. I think that would be great. And also on the signage, again, the community has said like, hey, we need more signage and all these other pieces, as well as the other amenities in some of the parks. Like, for example, Bel Air Park, at some point, there is going to be some trenching going through that park because they're redoing the drainage right below Bel Air Elementary, which gets flooded a lot because it doesn't. So there's going to be trenching. They could run municipal water to the park and put a drinking fountain in there. How much does that cost? That's an amenity you guys have identified as a need. It would be great just so the town can see that number. And then really my final comment, and it's very much in line with what Commissioner McInerney just said, is the town council that the people of the town of Tiburon voted for has pledged $2 million for an open space that's in the county of Marin and not in the town of Tiburon. They pledged $2 million. They will end up, it was for Measure M, and I'm on the record being very unfavorable of Measure M. However, not spending all the town money on things outside of the town. At the end, they'll probably end up having to spend a little over $1 million, which is the operating budget for maintaining the parks for 1 year. So the town very easily made a decision to do that. Your elected members, 5-0 or 4-0, made that decision. If you want things to happen, there's an election in November. 3 town council members are up for election. Vote. Make your opinion known in meetings at town council to say you want action. That's what happens. That's what needs to happen, because I agree with my other colleagues here, not enough has happened. Because it would be a shame of your efforts, the WRT and other professionals at the town have done all this work, and then nothing happens. That is a shame. Time is a precious commodity. We are on this planet once. We need to move forward on some things. The status quo is not acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other? Okay.
Yeah, so I don't have really a lot to add, but I mean, it seems clear to me that there's just a couple of things that shouldn't even be part of this discussion of a strategic plan. For example, maintenance and maps. Like, that just seems like, let's just do it. Like, why do we have to talk about it in the context of a strategic plan? I mean, it's a no-brainer. People want maps. We need signage and we need wayfinding. We should just do it. So I don't know how this town works as well. I'm newer to this. I don't know if that's the mayor or if that's your department or whoever has the power to make it happen, but we should just make it happen. And, you know, the maintenance, I hear the stories from the community members, and, you know, I would hate to have my child in tick infested tall grasses or whatnot, but, you know, if we do have a maintenance issue, let's also try to fix that. And again, I don't know how the process works or who's responsible. But those things just seem like normal course of business, and let's just get it done and not have it mired in some kind of strategic plan discussion. You know, I like where the plan and the study is going. You guys have just done an incredible job trying to get community input. It's such a hard job. I mean, to mobilize all of these community members that are very busy to get them to come to these pop-ups, to fill out surveys, to come to community meetings. I mean, I know there's been a lot of comments like we need to have more community engagement, like, and it's almost to the fact like it's your fault, but I'm not sure it's really your fault. It's just like people have things to do and they're busy, and you guys have just done an incredible job trying to get people engaged and doing all of this outreach. And honestly, I'm probably one I would vote not to extend and pay more money. And someone said, let's do another survey. I mean, it's just, we're going to get the same kind of results at the end of the day, is my view. Let's save the money. In terms of like threading the needle, I heard what city council or town council had said. I was in that meeting, how they wanted to move away from actually putting amenities in specific places and having more of a zoning concept. But I just feel like it's like, I almost feel like, what are we even doing then? Like, we're spending all this time and money and energy to just have zoning. On the other hand, not knowing like all the things that we want to implement and put in specific places, it's hard. This is a really hard project to really like put your arms around. So maybe one way to thread the needle is just focus on the high priority items, and maybe some other sort of low hanging fruit, and say, this is not like an absolute recommendation, but here's a representative example of how it might look based on high priority items, based on that statistically significant survey, a lot of community input, what we've heard, and, get people to visualize what it sort of can look like. I would be in favor of that. I think that could be a nice threading of the needle. I think I would be opposed to the smorgasbord effect on a map, where I think someone in a meeting said that that you're going to make Tiburon into a circus. Like I don't necessarily want to see that map of like every single idea, low priority, high priority. Let's just put it all out there. I think that will just confuse people, and I'm not sure it would really promote and advance what we want to do here. But look, the high priority ones that have been established, like let's try to figure those out. And maybe that's just a start. It's not what we're saying, this is what absolutely we're going to do, but here's just a representative example of what it could look like. Get people excited of what we're trying to do here. And then this is just maybe more process related. And again, this is my ignorance on how things get done in this town, because I'm newer to this. But it just feels like we need to have like I don't know what you call it, like a park czar, or like an executive director, or just someone who like puts this all together and just pushes things forward and then get into the details of the costs and the difficulties, the logistical issues, the sequencing, the timing. It just seems like there's a lot. And, again, this is part of the strategic plan, but every single thing that we have here, like for example, a pool, that's an incredible amount of work and time and resources to figure out, like, how much does this cost? Like, what does it entail? What's the operational issues around it? So it's really hard to make any decisions based on so many things that we have to look at. But at some point, I think we just need to be able to have a process in place to say, hey, look, let's promote, or let's bring up, like, let's just do this. Let's like figure out, I think a no-brainer, everyone agrees, SUP launch. Like, let's just put that out there on the agenda. Where are we going to put it? How much does it cost? And who's going to make it happen? Like, we just need a process. This is kind of post-strategic plan, but I mean, some of these things I feel like we can just get going. Like, I mean, playground seems like a no-brainer.
Well, so Commissioner Moon, just quickly on the SUP launch, we made a proposal. We sent it to town council and nothing happened. That was the second time it's actually gone to town council in which something's happened. Now it's a little bit more complicated to try to find a place, but it just never got addressed. It was like, oh, that's nice.
Right.
Next, let's talk about something else. Let's have let's talk about the discussion on a commemoration of a flag for something.
Right.
Sorry.
So,
Again,
so-
I'm being a little.
no, but I'm sort of using. I'm using that, I guess, as an example of like, how do we get things done? Because I think similarly, you guys at Post before the strategic plan had talked about pickleball and you wanted to have something happen there, and then town council, nothing happened in that. It seems like a lot of things like that happen. So I'm wondering, like, can we just change, this is again, outside of the context of the strategic plan, but it seems like Post as a commission, we just need to figure out a process that gets things done. And right now, how we're set up, it just doesn't seem that way. And the strategic plan is just going to be another document where, okay, things can go possibly here and here and here. But then let's just fast forward. Okay, well, we want to have, pickleball courts, or we want to have an SCP launch. So are we just going to rewind and just have that conversation you had 2 years ago?
Sadly, the way that the town is set
council.
up, yes, because we're not like the planning commission or design review commission in which we can make decisions and move things forward. We're kind of stuck in that loop a little bit. Unfortunately, we're a policy group, or is
For
one
advisory roles.
an advisory role. That's
Right.
it. We advise
Right.
versus, and even the other commissions still get, a design review, somebody has a point, they can still escalate it up to town council and still have a whole nother piece. But yeah, we're just
Right.
totally advisory with no teeth,
Right.
unfortunately.
So, yeah, so I think, I think the strategic plan is a good place. I think it's been very productive because what it has done is mobilize the community to come out and discuss and share what's important to them. It's a very messy framework, but it's, putting all this together in a format has been very difficult, but I think it's moving the needle, it's moving the ball forward. I think the next step here as we progress is figuring out a process between Post and town council and staff of really executing or implementing a system or a process that really gets things done. And that's just a side commentary of mine. No more comments.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I ask a specific question of staff?
Sure, sure.
Sorry, not to do this late, but I'm just curious. David, so BCDC's jurisdiction is like 100 feet from, from your perspective, are any of these projects like would have to go through that review, including a SUP launch? I think that.
Yes, they would.
Does the,
Case that you're enhancing and improving access to the bay, which is a high priority for them.
yeah,
In exchange for the ability to basically develop within their jurisdiction.
is that pretty much the only one of those recommendations in here you would say would fall within that jurisdiction?
Any project within 100 feet of that shoreline, we go through them, but it's an easy process.
Yes.
I'm working through 2 BCDC permits right now. You're looking at, 3 to 6 months.
Oh.
And you have a permit in hand. Exactly. Every storm drain project, lining project that we're doing that's along here, we have to go through that process, and it's about 3 to 6 months.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, well,
May I
when,
make one other comment? Sorry.
please, yeah.
One thing that hasn't been discussed, and I know, we looked at all the buildings and the buildings, basically, right? And maintaining them. One building that hasn't been discussed is kind of very important for the maintenance that we've been discussing, and that is the Public Works building. That is, I don't know if you guys have ever toured it. I highly recommend it. It's mostly out of code. There are mice in the walls.
Might be a
That's been
historic
reserved.
landmark, I think.
Anyways, I think that should also be somehow acknowledged, and that is also not a small cost. And if there is any natural disaster in town, we will want a public works building that is working.
I know it well, and I have done studies previously with the town. So I'm familiar with the existing conditions and the potential of the site.
Great, thank you. Can I just ask one last question of WRT, which is how many people in total have engaged in this process to encourage these projects? Through the survey and through the workshops, do you have a total head count? Or
That
even
would
a
be a
ballpark?
really good number to have just right here, and I don't. I think it was 400 in the survey, and I think it's been. I want to get back to you because I don't want to throw out a number that's wrong.
Sure,
But our
but
events,
hundreds,
our events
maybe
have ranged
thousands.
from 30 maybe max at the first in-person workshop. I think some of the online engagement, the latter round had a mix, sort of a range from 5 to 20 on each meeting. So you stack these meetings up, let's say average of 20 at each meeting, and there's been like 6 or so. So maybe that's another, 120 and 400 on the survey, and maybe another 60 or 80 online comments.
So we're into the,
Hundreds.
mid to upper hundreds
Yeah.
of people have engaged in this process, and we've heard from that many people, some 500 to 700 or so thereabouts ballpark, saying they want things to happen. They want upgrades to the parks. They want new park facilities. They want new recreational opportunities. That's not counting the people who call in and come every post meeting and say the same. So it's a lot of people have said this, and they've organized and engaged around this process. So we may not have any official teeth, but this process has been a huge organizing mechanism for this community. And I think that it is on the town council to see something through and to make sure that we get some changes, we get some actions and some new recreational opportunities out of this process. And I think that hundreds of people have come out to show their demand, and that is teeth. So I do think the town, that will hold the town council accountable to this. And we should hold the town council accountable to this. Because this is what we have heard the community wants. And they've been very eagerly engaging. So let's continue to do that. Let's hold them accountable. Let's get some new recreational opportunities and some upgrades and enhancements to these parks. And with that, I'll just say, if no one has any other comments, we can go to the action item.
Can I do a point
Please,
of order just
yeah.
for a restroom break?
Sure.
Okay.
Can we do that? Okay. We'll take a
Like a 5-minute break.
5-minute break. Okay,
Thank you, guys.
sure. Do we have to like call the meeting back to, or we're just back in the meeting, David? Okay, we're back. Action items. We're gonna go to an action item. We're gonna consider appointing a commissioner to an advisory group to work with town staff and consultants on the project of the transportation and infrastructure study. And before we do that, David, can you just give us like a summary of what the study is, what's it for, and what does the subcommittee on which we'll be appointing a commissioner to sit on, what is that meant to do?
Okay, absolutely, Chair, Commissioner. So little brief history on this, Town Council in December. They discussed a proposed scope to for an RFP for a traffic study on Tiburon Boulevard. And this is something that they've been requesting and talked about, you know, a couple meetings. And so what staff did is we put a request for proposal together and brought it back to Town Council for recommendation. And at their January 17th meeting, they approved the RFP and we went out to bid or advertisement. And we received three actually very good proposals. And we also had a selection committee that helped staff in selecting the consultant. And from Post, it was Vice Chair Hornbrook. And then from Town Council, we had Council Member Wellner. And then we also had a few members from the city of Belvedere along with staff. And we ended up choosing unanimously Parametrics Engineering. They have a very long history here in Southern Marin. They've done a lot of traffic studies for our neighboring jurisdictions, including Mill Valley, Corte Madera, Green Bay, San Anselmo as well. So they're very, very well qualified to do this work. So at the May 15th Town Council meeting, Town Council authorized the town manager to award the contract to Parametrics and also create an advisory panel to help staff and the consultant as this project moves forward. So we would have some meetings, you know, maybe every other month together on Zoom, where Parametrics will share their data, share, you know, what they've done. This way, Town Council member who was appointed at that meeting is Mayor Fredericks, where she can update Town Council where we're at, and their members can talk, you know, let Mayor Fredericks know, you know, what they've heard from their constituents so that she can report back to the meetings. So I think it's also advantageous to have someone from the Post Commission to be on that advisory panel as well, so that that member can also share and provide feedback to the commissioners and to the public during our meetings that we have and help guide this project and make it successful. It's not a cheap project. You know, it's $360,000. It may cost more depending on what happens as we go through this project, and what they're going to look at is primarily Tiburon Boulevard from Highway 101 all the way to Main Street. They're going to focus on that, the existing infrastructure, what kind of new infrastructure they can place there to ease traffic, what's causing the delays, what they can implement to improve traffic, whether it's infrastructure or rideshare programs, you know, just thinking outside the box. They're going to look at the schools, drop-off, pickup times. They'll also include traffic on Paradise Drive, the Loop, and Trestle Glen, how they come into Tiburon Boulevard. So it's going to be about a year-long project. I anticipate at least 6 meetings with the consultant and staff that the advisory panel will be involved in. And, you know, we may end up having, I believe, one workshop with the public. And then we're going to have a few council meetings and they'll present the Post as well. So right now we do have Mayor Fredericks on the advisory panel. We'd like to have one member of Post on this panel. I believe we will have one council member from the city of Belvedere on this panel, and perhaps also one member from the Reed Union School District on this panel as well, helping staff. So that's where we're at this evening, is to ask Post commissioners to weigh in on who they would like to nominate to be on this advisory panel for a year at minimum.
Okay, I think we go to we go to questions, commissioner questions, then.
Yes.
Then public comments,
Correct.
then commissioner discussion. So I have a question, if I can start the commissioner questions. Is there a way for us to get the full list of all the subcommittees we have going already right now?
I believe right now we have the Parks Master Plan Subcommittee, Vice Chair Hornbrook and Commissioner McInerney. And we also currently have the McKegney Green Use Policy with Chair Judge and Commissioner Moon.
Okay.
2 active subcommittees right now only.
Okay, okay, that's good. Thank you. Other questions?
The e-bike, we did have the e-bike that
Did, and a gentleman asked about that, and
did sunset.
I meant to come back to him and share that we did make a recommendation to town council to update the policy for the old rail trail.
Correct,
And
and
they
that
did-
was
and they did
with Chair
adopt it.
Judge and Commissioner Byrd were on that, and they did adopt the new policy on that, so.
Yeah. So, and so
Yeah.
that committee is done,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that committee basically determined like all that we can do. Did it, town council adopted it, and the rest is enforcement.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so that one's not there anymore. Any other questions?
I mean, with this, I just want to let commissioners know with this project. I know with the Parks Master Plan, heavy involvement. With the traffic study, we will be heavily involved, but there's more consultant work here that will provide answers to us that we would look at and try to analyze. So I want to let you know that it won't be as hard and heavy as the Parks Master Plan.
But so the outcome of this process is, just to make sure I heard this correctly, the consultant with support from this advisory subcommittee makes a set of recommendations on how to ease traffic down the main corridors, right?
Correct. And then these recommendations will be vetted through Caltrans. And then Caltrans would, let's say 8 or 9 recommendations go to Caltrans, and Caltrans only approves 4 of them. And we have this list of approved infrastructure upgrades along to Brown Boulevard, or geometric type upgrades, along with other type of outside the box improvements like ride sharing, park and ride, trolley systems. Other things could be additional crosswalks or signals, and then those approved recommendations would go to town council for basically adoption, and then we would have this living plan that we would try to coordinate with Caltrans to make these improvements.
So Caltrans, so all of these decisions are Caltrans's, or some of them are also within the jurisdiction of the town, depending on what they are?
Any physical improvements to Tiburon Boulevard would be through Caltrans.
Okay, and then other things like whatever
what-
outside of the box ideas could be town council, but in any case, they have to go to Caltrans and then they have to go to town council.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, it was, if I may add,
Yes, sir.
so on the selection committee, what was really interesting to me is that Caltrans just kind of goes along and does their thing. Maybe this is discussion, but correct me if I'm wrong, David. They just kind of do their thing unless they have lots of data from outside consultants that say like, oh, no, you should do this, this, and this. And then Caltrans will go, oh, that's interesting. Do you want to split the costs on that? Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean,
You're
there was,
correct.
so there's one example, like 20 years ago or 20-ish years ago, somebody made a recommendation to, when you come down Cecilia, where you, over by your house, when you come down the hill to turn left on Cecilia onto Tiburon Boulevard, there's no like safety area when you make that left turn. Somebody did a study saying, well, you should make a little safety area there. The town of Tiburon said like, no, we don't want to pay for that at that time. So they moved forward. So Caltrans then didn't make the update. Is that correct, David?
That is correct. So this is actually perfect timing because we, Caltrans is designing in the design phase for the rehab of Tiburon Boulevard. Their shop program for the paving project. So any data that we can get from this study would be advantageous for us. And with Parametrics having a lot of, they've done a lot of work with Caltrans, they will negotiate on our behalf for them to try to include some of these upgrades that are health and safety that are needed, try to incorporate that in their plan.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yep. You mentioned, our USD employees as well on there.
Correct.
So has there been any thinking outside the box of retrofitting the 2 lower elementary schools, the K through 2 and the 3 through 5 school, back to neighborhood schools? And instead of subsidizing the yellow bus every year for, I don't know, $100,000 every year, we could help retrofit the schools. And then we would have neighborhood schools. The only reason I say this is as somebody with 3 kids spaced out about 3 years apart, I have had a kid at all 3 schools and I have spent, yes, 2 of them rode their bikes, which was great and super helpful unless it was raining. But I've spent so much time bouncing back and forth along Tiburon Boulevard because I have to get myself to 3 different schools basically at the same time. So I need to be a magician at the same time. But I have thought for a while retrofitting the schools back to K through 5 schools. Therefore, you don't have to go all the way to Bel Air if you live down by Chuck's house. And if you live all the way down by Bel Air, you don't have to go down all the way to Reed School and create that traffic on Tiburon Boulevard, getting your kids back and forth.
And that is something Parametrics would look at because it's in their scope to analyze the schools, and having a representative on the advisory panel from the school district would be helpful as well.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay, let's go to public comment. Any member of the public? No. Okay. Online?
Yes, we do. We have one.
Okay.
Oh. We did. The hand was placed back down. Okay, here we go. Kathy?
Mute. Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. The panel, you didn't mention safe routes to school. They are sort of infiltrated in all of these different, agencies and been working on the whole plan for the traffic plan. I just think somebody from Safe Routes to School would be a good person to have on the panel. You have the Safe Routes to School team leader at least one of the schools. And they are involved with Safe Routes and have this task force meeting, once or twice a year, depending on how often it's needed.
Yes, Kathy, I myself, I am on the Safe Routes to School Task Force Committee. Parametrics actually runs the Safe Routes to School Task Force with Jen, the planner, senior planner on there. So we definitely will have the Safe Routes to School. I have all of their the wish list and everything that we've talked about, that we talk about every quarter when we meet. So Safe Routes to School definitely will be well represented within this advisory committee.
Okay, great. I can't think of anything else that would be better. Thank you.
Any other comments online?
I see none.
Okay. Well, then we can go to commissioner discussion now. Any discussion? who wants to be on the subcommittee?
I think somebody who's not on a subcommittee should be on this subcommittee.
Yeah, and I'm interested, just to put it out there, so.
And maybe somebody who's interested.
Is that is that about,
It's a
can I
hand
make a
raise.
motion to nominate Commissioner Burr to the subcommittee?
Second,
Third.
I'll take roll. Chair Judge,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hornbook,
yes.
Commissioner Burr,
Yes.
Commissioner McInerney,
Yes.
Commissioner Moon.
Yes.
Motion
Okay.
passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for making that easy. All right. Well, with that, we can call the meeting to a close. Do we? I lost my
Oh.
procedural.
You just adjourned the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, happy to give you a ride.